Why is it that some people give up earlier, or worse, don't even try to start something new in the first place? The answer to that question would be learned helplessness. Believing that you're not in control of anything in your life and that there's nothing you can do, no matter how hard you try, you're not going to be in the situation you'd like to be, and you're not going to manage to escape the pain that you would want to escape. This happens to people when they've gone through so many difficult experiences, so much suffering, so much pain, in which they couldn't change the situation, that they think that it applies to everything, that every single situation is going to be the same, as in that every single situation, no matter how hard they try, they're not going to manage to escape that pain. But how do we know learned helplessness actually is a thing? So there was this study on dogs. Unfortunately, back in those days, experiments on animals with, for example, shocks were allowed, which thank goodness isn't the case anymore. But in this study, there were two groups. One group that was basically a control group, and the other one in phase 1 of the experiment. They were in a situation in which they couldn't escape being shocked. Whereas in the second phase, in which the control group and the shock group were put together, in this phase, all dogs were able to escape being shocked, escape this extremely painful experience. However, what happened is that those dogs who were shocked before didn't escape, even though they could have, simply because they thought that there's no point, no matter how much they try, they're not going to manage to deal with that situation. Whereas the control group, most of those dogs actually did learn to escape that shock. Now, this was a study on dogs. How do we know whether it's the same with us human beings? In another study, this time on humans, these people were split into 3 groups. One was a control group, and the other 2 groups, they were put in a situation in which there were lots of annoying noises. And in one of those groups, the participants could do something against that noise. They could somehow switch that off. Whereas in the other group, they couldn't. And then in phase 2 of this experiment, all these 3 groups were put together, and in this scenario, all the groups, every single participant, was able to get rid of the annoying noise, which they would have to do to solve these anagrams. And what happened is that both the control group and the participants that were able to escape in the first phase, they actually did do something against the annoying noise, whereas the group that couldn't do so in the first phase also didn't do so in the second phase, even though in the second phase they could have done so. According to psychologists Seligman and Meyer, there are 3 different components of learned helplessness. The first one would be a cognitive deficit. That once we've gone through learned helplessness, we find it more difficult to learn from our past experiences, and we have difficulties noticing how our behaviour contributes to the results we get in our life, or influences which consequences are going to follow. And the second component would be a motivational deficit. Since people who have gone through so much pain that they've kind of learnt this helplessness don't try in the first place because they think they're going to fail anyway, no matter how hard they try, they get less positive results because they don't try as hard. And therefore, their belief that they can't do anything about the situation is confirmed. And then the third component would be an emotional deficit. Due to all the suffering that they've experienced, of course, they feel very depressed and very anxious. But it's not only the case that their mental health is in a bad state. There are also a lot of physical symptoms that result from learned helplessness. For example, high blood pressure. So it's not only the case that learned helplessness makes you extremely depressed, it's also the case that it makes you very ill. And by the way, what's also very interesting is that there are 8 different components of depression, and in a learned helplessness situation, people show all 7 of these depressive symptoms. Now, if you want to know how you can be more proactive or why to be more proactive in the first place, you can watch this video here.